Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. Here's your host, Alex Klausner and Bobby Carney.
Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps. I am Alex Klausner, and I'm joined today by Bobby Carney. We are breaking down the Denver Broncos 33-10 victory over the New Orleans Saints on Thursday Night Football last night. Now, this game had a lot of intrigue going into it. We saw the return of Sean Payton to the Superdome. What an awesome storyline that was, kind of going into this game. How is he going to do against his old team, where he built his legacy, where he won a Super Bowl, the team's only Super Bowl. I mean, this is has to be the most beloved figure in Saints history, and he's standing on the opposing sidelines in Broncos colors. And not to mention, just so we can fully comprehend this thing, okay? Sean Payton went to the Drew Brees honorary luncheon because this was like Drew Brees night where we're going to honor Drew Brees. Sean Payton showed up in a Broncos jersey to the lunch. Like, come on, man. And then proceeds to stomp all over his old team in this game. And not to mention his old, I guess you would say, underling, Dennis Allen, on the other sideline. We're going to talk about him. So, Bobby, tell me what you thought about this game and kind of how it went for fantasy.
Yeah, no, this is definitely if the only people that were happy after this game, I feel like, are, depending on your scoring, like maybe you're kind of happy with playing Bo Nix. Definitely Javonte Williams owners were happy. Denver defense went off. They got a touchdown. They got a couple sacks.
Right, if your Dynasty League is playing defenses, you are loving Denver this year. That is for sure.
Yeah, so there was definitely a lot of, there were some notable things. Like, we'll obviously talk about them in the show. Like, all this crazy stuff. Like, we've had a lot busier Thursday night games. This was very not that.
I mean, it was rough. It was hard to keep my eyes open at times in this game, particularly the first half. We did see a busier second half in terms of scoring, when the Broncos really kind of got away with this thing. So let's get into kind of our game ball, our bell of shame, our buys, and our sells for this thing. So first, we're going to start with our game ball. Bobby and I both agreed before the episode, the game ball is unanimous. It goes to Broncos running back Javonte Williams. There was not... I mean, I guess you could say Saints wide receiver Cedric Wilson, his 17 PPR points, but that paled in comparison to Javonte Williams, his 26.1 PPR points, his on 14 carries, highly efficient, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. He got 3 of 3 in the receiving game for 23 yards. Here's some advanced metrics I want to throw out there before we let Bobby continue with his breakdown of Javonte's game. 0.52 rush EPA, great job, but led all of the running backs in the routes that he ran. He ran 13 routes. By the way, wide receiver Troy Franklin ran 17 for the Broncos. So just to give you a picture of how involved Javonte is getting in terms of getting out on the routes and making himself available as an option in this pass game. So, Bobby, tell me about Javonte. Kind of a little victory lap for us. We talked about him as a buy a couple weeks ago.
No, yes, it was finally good to see a little bit of Javonte getting back to the Javonte that we've seen in the past. That was very nice to see. The crazy thing for me is at the end of the day, it's the 2 touchdowns. Because if you look at some prior games, he's had more targets, he's had more receptions, he's getting the same amount of carries, some similar yardage, but it's just those games he wasn't getting touchdowns. Now he was getting touchdowns, and it turns some of these 12, 13 point average games into what you see here. So it's definitely a good performance to see that he's finally getting in the end zone. Just a little bit of some of the I would kind of say the asterisk I would maybe want to put on this game is this is the same New Orleans Saints defense that made Sean Tucker look like Barry Sanders. That's what I would be worried about. Is just this spiral of the Saints. Just we don't know what's going on with the Saints right now, but it's definitely like, are the Saints becoming a, if you have a running back playing the Saints, you have to start them.
Well, I think it's definitely becoming that kind of situation when, especially when you have Richard Sherman at halftime on the broadcast, to like openly like watching the guys and just saying like, are they trying to get their coach fired? And we're going to talk about that. I mean, on like the hot seat index this week, I haven't mentioned, I think the Saints should probably move away from Dennis Allen. I was saying that this week, and I said, I mean, it's even more apparent now. I mean, those questions are now openly coming out. And yeah, it's even more of an indictment, I think, of what you just said, about Dennis Allen, because he is supposed to be a strong defensive coach. That's kind of what his career is built on, is putting out good defenses. And when you see what the results have been in New Orleans, I mean, how can you let that continue? It's been brutal.
Yeah, a stat I just had to pull up for us. They've given up 1,000 yards rushing already this season. That is the most in the NFL. They give up 5.4 yards a carry, the most in the NFL, and they've given up 9 rushes of over 20 yards, most in the NFL.
It's back to that thing. Remember those old days when it was like early 2010 Saints, where it was like the Saints defense was the gift that kept on giving. Any guy that was playing the Saints, just go ahead and roll him out in your starting lineup, because you knew that guy was going to smash, and they were giving up literally historic amounts of yards. And what's funny, I think the defensive coordinator for those Saints teams is the guy who's the DC for the Chiefs right now, who's having a historic run. So, that's kind of interesting how much he's turned it around. But yeah, I mean, I think we're just back to that kind of vibe with the Saints, like you were saying. And it's a real shame. So speaking of, we are going to ring the bell of shame. Now, we talk about this as like guys that you put in your lineup and just dud out for you. Like the guys you expect to be good that aren't, right? That's to me how I define it. And though this guy is not a guy that I would say you are going out there going, oh, this guy's a wide receiver 1, I got to have him in my lineup weekly. You do expect better than this performance right here from wide receiver Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos, for whom I ring the bell of shame. Shame, shame, ding, because he was not even targeted on 22 routes run, which was a team-leading route run share. Okay? That is absolutely pathetic. The target share has steadily been going down since his first week, where he got like 11 targets. Then it was like, okay, now it's 8, now it's 6, now it's 4, and now it's 0. That is not good. Now, at halftime, Sean Payton comes out and he's like, well, he was facing a lot of zone coverage. And so, when he's facing zone coverage, it's just hard for him to do the things that he needs to do. Now, look, that's all well and good, but I'm here to tell you, my friends, that I've got some news for you. NFL loves to run zone coverage. It runs majority zone coverage. In fact, so if you are a receiver who's going to just get erased because the other team is calling zone, well, I've got some news for you. You're screwed. All right? So, Courtland Sutton, bell of shame. Bobby, who are you ringing it for this week?
Yes. I mean, there was definitely a really bad game from Sutton. But trying to at least diversify with some of the talking points in this show, I had to give it to Alvin Kamara. While granted, like a 0 on almost all formats from a player, a 0 is going to kill you trying to win a game. But I mean, what Alvin Kamara delivered, 7 rushes, 10 yards, 6 catches, 14 yards. I mean, you're talking about like what, 5? Like, he's literally the only offensive weapon they have. Like, you'd expect they would at least try to be feeding him more or trying to get more design stuff, and you probably started him going, he's the only guy. They got to do something.
Exactly what you said. I actually was going to say, because I had considered giving Kamara the bell of shame myself until I was thinking about it, like, what is really worse? You know, is it like being the running back that's supposed to smash and like just getting absolutely stifled despite usage? Or is it getting literally not targeted, not even looked at by your quarterback? I think that to me is probably worse. But Kamara is like, when you have to factor, the guy scored 8 points like PPR this week, and his catches were 6 of them. So if you started him in standard, if you started him in half point, that number is significantly lower. So it's just like, it's near a 0. And you, like, Kamara is a guy that you roll out and you're like, this guy is at least going to get me double digit.
Oh yeah, he was like a top 5 running back in almost any platform. I mean, granted, a lot of it is that 4 touchdown Dallas game, but still, he's been like a decent performer. Even last week and the week before, like he scored pretty decent on the Bucs, which are one of the best rush defenses in the NFL. So you're thinking, well, if he can do well against one of the best rush defenses in the NFL, that he should be able to at least do something against the Denver Broncos. Well, yes, they are also a good defense, but you'd expect them to do something. And it was his lowest rush attempts, his lowest pass attempts. Like, it's just insane how bad of his performance was compared to the rest of these games.
Now, granted, one thing that we do have to go off of here is that in that Bucs game, he did have a quarterback that could threaten the defense downfield a bit, right? Here you have no Olave, you have no Rashid, you got Spencer Rattler out there. I mean, their best weapon, their highest scoring guy in this game is wide receiver Cedric Wilson. And then there's Mason Tipton at wide receiver. You ever heard of Mason Tipton?
No, I've not.
I hadn't either until today when I looked at the box score and was watching the game last night going, this Mason Tipton dude had 10 points. Who would have thunk it? So, like, it is a mess in New Orleans right now. And I mean, like, I get that there's a lot of injuries, but, like, I got to wonder how much Alvin Kamara was just out there kind of phoning it in, to be quite honest with you.
Well, then, yes, this is my last talking point with Kamara before we move on, which is pretty much, if you are a Kamara owner, are you sitting Kamara until some of these guys are back? Carr, Olave, Shaheed, are you just going to, after this game, are you just sitting Kamara, or do you just still have to start him?
I will answer that in that if I am a Kamara owner, my thinking on this is going to be, if Dennis Allen is still the coach, sitting Kamara. If they switch it to Clint Kubiak, which I will expect that they do, like, probably Monday, if not sooner, then yeah, I would then maybe consider reinserting Kamara. But even then, I would have to wait until Carr's back, until Olave's back, until blah blah blah. You know what I'm saying? So, honestly, I'm just, if there is an owner out there that I already know has talked to me about Kamara before, is interested, is going to, like, is just like such a, you know what I mean? Like, he's got to be a Kamara fanboy that's like wanted Kamara for years and just hasn't been able to get him. You know, find that guy in your league and then go see what he'll give you. That's what I'd be doing. But if I don't think that guy is a very common dude to have in your fantasy league. So if you don't have that guy in your league, then yeah, I just hold and hope that Clint Kubiak becomes the coach at some point and this offense kind of finds a spark.
I think Allen's going to at least stay, because in 2 weeks he'll play the Panthers. I think he stays until the Panthers, because they'll just sit there and say, hey, can we get this kind of like get right game with the Panthers? And if he loses that game, and then they're looking at 3-6 or 2-7 in the face, that's when he goes.
like, I mean, I was going to talk a little more about Dennis like later because we were going to do the sell portion, and I was going to talk about like Derek Carr.
We can
preview
wait
for that later. You know what I'm saying?
We can wait.
No. I mean, let's talk about Dennis now because I think that losing to any team the way that they lost and having the effort that they showed and like the losing the locker room questions and all of that would be probably enough for him to get kind of the treatment that you're talking about right now. Like that, just like the tier 5 hot seat treatment, right? Where it's just like, he's going anytime, but I think we just don't know. Dude, I think losing like you lost to who you lost to, on what night you lost on national television, that's going to get you fired, man. Like, I don't see him surviving we just lost to Sean Payton on Drew Brees night. You know what I'm saying? Like, yep. that to me,
I still think hurts. He's going to get a little bit of leeway just because of these injuries. They're extending his lifespan. I
can buy that argument, but I'm just saying, like, I remember what happened to John Robinson the night after A.J. Brown came in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform and went for 200 yards on the Titans. The general manager who traded him was gone the next day, my man. You just can't embarrass your team, your brand like that, and that's what really happened to the Saints last night. And I think as an owner, like when it's not just your team lost, it's like your brand got crapped on, that to me is like, where as an owner, I think I go, that's enough.
Well, it's also a game of remembering yesteryear, and then because yesteryear's on the other sideline, and then he beats the hell out of you, and then it's like, why is he not here?
Right. Well, why he's not here seems like there's some ownership stuff. Right. It's we don't know. So there's definitely some stuff behind closed doors for him to show up to Drew Brees' like honorary lunch in a Broncos jersey. That to me says there's some bad blood that we just don't know about, that will come out eventually. So let's get into the buys of this, what could be Dennis Allen's final game as the Saints coach here. The buy to me is, look, I am telling you right now, do not go and buy Cedric Wilson, please. Like, the guy's 28 and probably on a 1-year deal. Like, just don't do that. You can throw a waiver claim at Mason Tipton if you want, but I'd be careful about investing in, fringe assets like Mason Tipton when you have a coaching change impending, new regime, who knows? However, one thing that is nice for Tipton is that, Bobby has talked a lot about the Saints cap situation, and how they kind of and we all know this, the Saints just love to kick money down the road. I do think there actually is perhaps some hidden value in a guy like Tipton, where it's like, they're just going to need cheap depth receivers. Maybe him already being on the roster, that's a guy for next year that has there's some juice to squeeze there. I don't know. But my guy here, Denver wide receiver Troy Franklin. Guy went 5 of 6 receiving for 50 yards. The stat line wasn't great. It wasn't like, oh my God, gotta have Troy Franklin. But here's the thing. We are seeing now Troy Franklin's involvement in this offense tick up, especially as we've seen Cortland Sutton's tick down, right? And we gotta remember, chemistry is so important between the quarterback and the wide receiver, right? And so it's like, dude, that's Bo Nix's boy from Oregon. That's a situation I'm buying on. How about you, Bobby? What do you think?
You took the words right out of my mouth. That was exactly what I was going to say. Is we were just discussing how Cortland Sutton's target numbers are going down. They're going to this guy because he started the year with little to no targets, and now his target shares are slowly going up. All those looks that Cortland Sutton was getting are now moving over to Troy Franklin because, like you're saying, They played together in college. He's not trusting Cortland Sutton, and it's like, let me go to my guy from college because I know I can trust him. And yes, his stat line is not explosive, but why we're kind of having him a little bit in this buy window is his stat sheet this year. He's only gone double digits once, and you might see a guy who spent a mid to late second on this guy in rookie draft kind of sitting there going, this is not what I expected us for a second round pick in a rookie draft, and might be happy with just getting that second round pick back. And you're just kind of like buying low in some form. Like still, like he's still doing decently for a second round pick, but you might see some people that just get me out of this, especially a struggling team of like, I'd rather just start investing in draft capital next year. And you can just buy low on this guy still.
So my case was going to be similar to yours, like the trading thing, right? Like I don't think you're going to be able to get anybody to just who's straight up like out on Franklin right now enough to the point where they're going to say, I'm just going to give him to you for what I paid, right? I think what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to give him like a second that you can sell. It's like, I know this is a team that looks like they're headed for the seller, you know. It's a 201, right? Like, or it's a 201, it's a 202. It's going to be in that range, right? You can offer him kind of like an upsell on the pick. Maybe you could offer a bench asset on top. What I would try to be doing is try to give him a second and then something else. I would not be trying to trade a first for Troy Franklin.
Do like a player swap upgrade.
Yeah, exactly. You try to find the package that kind of gives that guy a little bit extra to where, yeah, that's the sweetener that gets him to send you Troy Franklin. Because here's what I'm saying is getting a receiver that is in the situation he is in for that price is such a great move. Would you pay like 201, for example, to get half of what Puka Nacua gave you last year?
Well, yes, I would definitely spend that. But the issue is Puka was performing week 1, week 2. His numbers, he's still trending up, but he's not trending up enough for me to pretty much give a glorified first round pick away.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying this guy's going to be Puka Nacua.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, but he is in the Puka Nacua situation.
Yeah.
Which is this, okay? You have a quarterback in a very friendly offense for production, right? We know McVay's offense produces fantasy points. We know Sean Payton's offense produces fantasy points. Sean Payton is coaching Bo Nix right now. You know the ball is going to go into the air. It's what he does. You know, it's what he wants to do. If Sean Payton has his way, they're throwing 700 yards and 6 touchdowns that day. Like, that's ultimately where this thing, like, can go. Now, not saying that Bo Nix is going to do that. Not saying that Troy Franklin is going to, you know, be some killer. What I'm trying to say is that you have a pass-happy coach who wants to throw the football, who wants to play that style of offense, and you have a receiver who is in a room that is devoid of consistent receiving options. That was Puka Nacua last year. Puka Nacua was walking into a receiving room where it was like Van Jefferson, Demarcus Robinson. Yes, there's Cooper Kupp, but Cooper Kupp was hurt. Now we have Cortland Sutton is the guy in the way, but Cortland Sutton isn't even getting looked at.
And something you also need to be thinking about, because I'll just take a peek at it, Cortland Sutton's last year of his deal is next year. So he could easily either be just out after 25, or he's only they only lose $7 million. I mean, he's a cap hit of 13, but his cap space taking is 20. He could easily be a cap casualty if they find some young. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that, my whole point is, regardless of Cortland Sutton, what we're seeing is, even if Cortland Sutton is on the field, he's not taking targets away from Troy Franklin. You know what I'm saying? So, like, this guy is I think he's not the alpha dog receiver, and I don't think that he is like the long-term future, but I do think that he, first of all, can be more of a vertical threat than he currently is. And I think if they allow him to get into that role and as he learns the offense, I mean, I do think playing with his college quarterback is just going to be such a huge advantage to him as they move forward and as Bo Nix develops.
And Bo Nix will be an advocate for him to get paid.
Yes. Well, I was going to just say, I've talked a lot, Bobby. You take it from me. You take it the rest of the way on Troy Franklin here.
I mean, again, we're pretty much on the same page of like, yes, he's got a wide open wide receiver room to get targets from. The only person that's kind of in his way is technically not even in his way because he's already taking targets from him, but he could physically be out the door sooner rather than later. And then, yes, if he keeps producing, if he keeps performing, what's going to happen is he will be in, because his contract will be up before Bo Nix's. Now, granted, maybe Denver tries to sit there and do an early deal if he's really performing well, to maybe try to like get a better price on him down the road. But I think at the end of the day, like, yes, if he's performing and he's going to be one of his top targets throughout his rookie deal, like, you will have Bo Nix going, he's not leaving the building.
If Bo Nix really becomes the franchise guy in Denver, you know, there have been like all these stories of like, you know, look at Aaron Rodgers now, you know, like how he just gets his boys in the building, right? Like, and that's how it is. It's like, get me Randall Cobb back and they'll just listen to him, right? That was actually a thing in like Troy Aikman's story, is there was a long snapper on the team who was like employed by the team for like 16 years or something like that. And it was because that was like Troy Aikman's like best friend. That was just his homie. And he was just like, no, man, we're keeping that long snapper forever. Like, that's just how it was, you know? All right, now we're going to get into the sell. Now, this is where we diverge a little bit. We both got different sells, but I think we're along the same lines. So why don't you give me your sell first here, and then I'll follow up with mine.
Mine is pretty simple. It is get out of any New Orleans Saints asset. Because just like we've been saying in this podcast, with the head coaching situation, with the cap situation coming up, I think the bill is finally due for the New Orleans Saints. They're becoming an old team. They're definitely not competing. They have a fourth highest payroll in the NFL, and they're 2-5. Something has to give. They're not getting what they're paying for. I think we're getting to the point of a wholesale change in New Orleans. And the number one thing I don't like in Dynasty is knowing where my guy's going to be playing. So if you're a Camaro owner, get out because he could be a cap casualty or traded. You know, if you're a Derek Carr owner, Derek Carr could be out the window before you know it. Like I think Chris Olave could maybe be safe, but it's still like, well, then who's throwing him the ball? If you have a young quarterback coming in and they don't know how to throw the ball to him, then his stock goes down. That's where I'm just like, there's too many question marks and too much uncertainty of the future of those assets. That's why I'm just like, get out on everything.
I'm glad that I let you go first because mine just kind of piggybacks off of yours. Mine is specifically Derek Carr. So my look at that is pretty much the same viewpoint as yours, right? It's like, I know Derek Carr can't be traded, and his contract out isn't until next year. So they're almost like, in a way, they're in that Russ situation in which they either have to run it back with him next year or they're just going to cut the dead cap. I almost wonder if they are just going to let next year be the year that they let the team bottom out. I think what really is going to happen here, like, this is kind of where I see things going. And I could be wrong. Like, this is just me being a little predictive. Sue me if I'm wrong. Please don't, actually. Please don't. But point being is what I think is going to happen. They're firing Dennis Allen. They're going to install Clint Kubiak as like the quarterback guy. Can we fix Derek Carr this year? Right. I don't think that's going to happen. Then they're going to replace Derek Carr at the end of this year. And what they're going to do is they're going to use next year kind of almost as like what the Bucks almost did, like where it was like we're letting all the dead cap just go, right? This year, we're getting the cheapest quarterback option imaginable. I think for them, that'll just be going to the draft. They'll just go to the draft.
Oh, yeah.
Get some
They're drafting
rookie.
a guy. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll just draft somebody. They'll let that cheap rookie contract go, and they'll just let that dead money just wash out and hit the reset button. And either it'll be Clint Kubiak coaching next year, or it'll be somebody that it's like, we need to get the most out of this rookie because he's going to be playing with basically nobody because we can't sign anybody. So my point being, this I think is your final sell window for Derek Carr before his career in the NFL is actually just over. Like, he's not going to be a starter again after this. This is it. So I think from a dynasty perspective, it's like, take what Bobby just said and apply that to Derek Carr. Because if you're in a super flex format, there's probably somebody out there that's going to at least want in on like whatever juice there is left to squeeze out of Derek Carr is just like inserting them into their lineup. Like,
they're going to be playing from behind.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be fantasy points there for like whatever duration of Derek Carr's career is left. And if you want in on that, great. And if there's somebody that wants in on that, take full advantage and just get what you can get. That is my take on Carr. Bobby, do you have anything you want to add about Carr there?
He's the biggest piece of this cap that they in 2025 they're currently 82 million over cap, which is insane because they've kept punting and punting and punting all their debt down the road because they think they had this championship window with Derek Carr, and it just has not fruitioned. It is not fruitioned at all. He is a 50 mil cap hit in 25, 62 mil cap hit in 26. I don't think it's going to be like a cut because just when you're that over the cap, you just can't. You're trying to dump money, not eat money. So that would be my only worry. But if this stinker continues, I mean, they're currently right now the 7th overall pick in the 2025 in the 2025 NFL draft. So you're discussing right now New England's 101. Well, New England's not going to draft. They have Drake May. Cleveland maybe, but Deshaun Watson's still in the building. So Jacksonville.
I feel like Cleveland is going to draft a quarterback because I think actually drafting a quarterback is the only like financial option they really have right now with this Deshaun Watson deal.
Yeah. Jacksonville's 3. There'll probably be some people thinking that they could consider it, but you just paid Trevor Lawrence. Like you can't just eat all that money. Then Carolina, they're drafting someone. Rams, maybe they're drafting someone. So you are getting to that situation of like, well, yeah, now they're at quarterback 4 or 5. So if they stay in that high teens range, it like in the like high 10s, they might be sitting there going, we're going to run it back one more year of Carr just because we need to pay bills. And then the next year is when they're going to let Carr walk and then move on with a rookie quarterback. But still, there's too many questions. It's too messy there. Just get out.
I would say so. I think just take advantage of the perception that Derek Carr is going to come back and sell now, because I truly believe his value will be at is highest when he's not on the field. And because when he comes back onto the field, I think it's just going to go down and down and down. So really, I think this is the time. Don't try to wait until that production comes. Just take what you can get, if anything, or just cut him and get the roster space back. I mean, that if you're in single quarterback, I think is a perfectly valid option. So, all right, everybody. This has been the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. Thank you for joining us for this breakdown of Thursday Night Football. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Join us again on Tuesday when we put out our big breakdown of all of the action from Sunday. There's going to be a lot to talk about. It's the NFL. It is the gift that keeps on giving. So make sure to tune in with us next time on the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps. I've been Alex Klausner, joined by Bobby Carney. See you next time.